Hi, Mizzo here. So I held off doing this video because I was sort of waiting for questions, and I'm glad I did because I've met with some students, and just talking to them has kind of helped me figure out, what are some things I might say that could potentially help you as you're working on your speech this week and recording it by Sunday. I think at least one of you have already turned your speech in, so feel free to not watch this video if you think it'll mess you up or make you worry. And if there might be some things in here that it's like, oh, that would have been nice 2 weeks ago, but Mizzo, I can't worry about that now. Take what serves you. This is like yoga. Take what serves you, let the rest go. So I'm going to talk a bit. Remember, there's no right or wrong, so we're trying to process, how to do this, how to think through this. So I'm just going to give you some things to hopefully help. So the first thing is, right, when we're thinking about persuasion and specifically argumentation, and I had a student ask, "What's the difference?" And I was like, persuasion is persuasion is travel. Argumentation is the train, right? Like the argumentation is the structure, the mode that gets you there. Persuasion is what you're trying to do. So when we're trying to do persuasion, what's the main thing we're trying to do? What's the main thing we're trying to do? Make change. That's it. We're trying to make change. So, what are we trying to change? If you've seen the videos from the last couple of weeks, you know this. Values, beliefs, attitudes, behaviors. Those are the things you're trying to change. And what can I change? What is even possible to change? And what will make the biggest change? And remember, you can't you your speech doesn't work if you're not talking to your target audience, right? Because change can only come from your target audience. And if you're arguing for change that, like, if you're asking for something that already exists, it's not change. So that's called the status quo. So, target audience, right, is those who can do what you're asking and are willing. So, if you're, trying to persuade all of us to go to college, like that's we're not your target audience. We've already been to college. But if you're trying to and if you're trying to persuade all of us that college is important, what do you gain? So that's the other piece. You're thinking about change. What's the change? What change needs to happen? And what do I get if I do my goal? So I would literally write your goal like up on your sheet of paper, right? What is the change that you want? And so and usually it is, go as like direct and ground level as you can. So I had a student in class yesterday, and her argumentation speech was excellent. It was all about why you should get bigger tanks for your fish, specifically betta fish. And apparently, most stores like Walmart recommend these smaller tanks. And then there's all this research that says there's all these ways that fish can die in the smaller tanks. And I was asking her, like, okay, what is the change you're trying to make? She's like, well, I'm trying to get uh, people to buy bigger tanks. It's like, why? What's the so what? What do you get? And she's like, well, if they buy, like, I want them to buy bigger. It's like, what's the goal? And finally, it's like, less dead fish. That's the goal, right? If you're doing some big country, right, there is probably less death, less destruction, less hungry people, less homeless people, less people being bullied, more pay for underprivileged people, right? Like there's probably some level of change happening where something needs to change because it is oppressive, unethical, unserving for a group, right? So, a couple things here. The first thing is a lot of times what happens is people understand that something needs to change, but then what they actually do is they don't do that in their speech. They spend a ton of time telling us why it's bad. So let's pick a topic like uh, uh, you know if you're, sorry, I'm trying to come up with a, I'm trying to come up with a really good one. Um, oh, yeah. So let's say I just did some stuff with gender stuff, right? And when babies are born and they don't neatly fit the male and female categories, right? Um, uh, they're under this umbrella called intersex. And what often happens is, depending on, and there's a lot of ways that you can be intersex. Go watch the BuzzFeed video if you want to know more of what I'm talking about. Um, the what often happens is they will do surgeries, and research shows that even though the doctors are saying, if you don't do the surgery, if you don't think fix this deformity, this will affect your child mentally, they'll have all these health problems. Well, the research shows that's not true. The research shows that actually, if you do have the surgery, um, that's where the health problems are, and that's often where it causes some mental and emotional stuff. So, what in theory, in that first speech, I've set up what intersex is and what these surgeries are and how often they happen and like all of this information. And if you haven't completely set your topic up in the first speech, and sometimes even if you have, it's really tempting to spend this whole persuasive speech convincing us why doing these surgeries is bad. And let's say you do. First of all, it's very hard to change our values. Probably if we get on board, we've already had that value. Like we already are not into doing surgeries on kids, right? Like, or we just didn't know. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you're not going to be able to change our values. So you might make us aware of the issue. But if once you make us aware, most likely most of the people in your target audience will already agree it's bad. So one, then you don't have a target audience. But even if you do, and even if you convince us, what do you get? What do you get? You don't get less surgeries. You don't, I guess you might get ambassadors, but there's only 20 of us. I mean, if this was 1,000 people and you were educating, that might be one thing, but like, ideally, if the goal is less surgeries, tell me where they're happening. Tell me how they happen. Tell me what education needs to happen. Tell me what other people have done to make this change in the past. This is the other thing to remember. You are not reinventing the wheel. You are joining a conversation. So I can't imagine there's going to be anybody that like invents solutions, right? Go find out what's working, right? If your topic is homelessness, Milwaukee literally eradicated homelessness for veterans. How did they do it? How can we do it for non-veterans? There's a city out west, I don't remember which one it is, they have no homeless problem hardly at all. Statistically super low. How did they do it? Go find what has worked other places. Go find what people are saying, and then figure out how it connects to us. So here is then the next thing, or sometimes a problem, but the thing to think about. Think about your tension between individual solutions and big policy changes. Because individual solutions are going to be easier to implement and will probably be convinced at some level if we're in your target audience and you're persuasive. But bigger policy changes make bigger change, but they're way harder to do. So the topic that I always think of is pollution. Because what a lot of times people do is they set up the problem, the issue of pollution. The goal is earth, right? Like less damage to the earth. And then they give me all these personal solutions. Recycle, don't litter, the big one, take less showers, energy consumption, change your light bulbs, take less showers. And I'm like, I take very fast showers, cut down a few years ago. But even if you do all of that, right? Research shows that it's like I haven't looked recently, 85% of carbon emissions, general pollution comes from corporations. So if you really want to make change in pollution, you need to regulate the corporations, which is way harder to do than convincing 20 of us to take 30 seconds off our shower time. But you've got companies like Miller, Sprecher in town here, and I don't remember, I gotta get the date right. And I don't think I told you this. I may have told you this in a previous video, but basically they dump more beer in a day because it doesn't fit their quality standards than Sprecher brews in like a year. Maybe it's a week that they dump. I don't remember the exact statistics, but if you've got companies like here I am taking shorter showers, and it's literally a drop in the bucket, right? So you want to think about the balance between individual solutions and larger systemic solutions. Can you convince us all to exercise more? Sure. But if we change, actually, sex ed's better. Can you convince us all to have safe sex, use protection, do our own research, know what's happening, all of that? Sure. But that's 20 people, and and we're pretty old. Some of us probably, it's like that might be useful, but not as useful. But if you institute sex ed in middle school, research shows that makes major change, right? But it's harder to do policy change than it is individual solutions. And that doesn't mean you can't do both. And even making us aware of the policy changes, and then is there anything that we can do? Can we sign an online petition? Can we call somebody? These drag bans that are happening right now, we should all be calling our representatives and writing hand notes, because the government is archaic and they value hand notes, handwritten notes. What? That's the way you make change, is you handwrite your representative. No wonder the like people with a lot of time and money on their hands get their way, because they've got time to do it. Old people writing hand notes, right? And honestly, persuasion is hard. It's really, really, really hard. So don't be afraid to say that out loud, right? If you're trying to get us to quit smoking, if you're trying to get us to quit drinking and driving, what often happens is people spend the whole speech telling me why it's bad and why it should change. And I'm like, I agree. But you need to at least recognize Wisconsin drinking culture. You need to at least recognize that good people drive drunk and make a mistake. You need to tell us, like, hey, I know this is hard. Here's what sometimes happens in a moment, right? So thinking about what you can say out loud to say, I know this is hard. Here are little things you can do, right? A lot of these topics wellness get distracted driving, drinking and driving, smoking, right? Like, it should be easy to just say, this shouldn't be a problem, just fix it, right? But it's so much more complicated than that, right? It should be easy to say, these surgeries on little babies that don't fit our social norms are hurting people, and there's no good reason to do them, so stop doing them. And our culture, our sex binary, the norms, let's blame the parents. And it's like, often doctors are coming to the parents and saying, something's wrong with your kid, we can fix it. If you don't know any better, I mean, there's a person on campus, Eric Lohman. I feel comfortable telling you this because him and his wife wrote a book. It's called Raising Rosie, if you want to look it up. I mean, Lohman has a PhD, and I've talked to him personally, and he's like, I have a PhD, and it was hard to navigate the research and to know what to do. I can't even imagine, if I wasn't equipped as a parent to do that. I would absolutely believe a doctor coming in. Well, how do you educate doctors? That kind of thing, right? So be aware. What are you trying to change? Values, beliefs, attitudes, behaviors. I would focus on attitudes and behaviors. It's rare, but there might be one or two of your topics that do benefit from sort of a cultural mind shift, information refocusing, things we need to know. A lot of the mental health conversation before we could even get to people enrolling in therapy, behavior change. People being on meds, behavior change. Do you see what I'm saying? Mental health release at work and school, behavior change, policy change. Before we even needed to do that, we needed to destigmatize mental health, which is an attitude change, and maybe at some level a belief change. So you're joining a conversation. You're trying to use your structure and information to make an argument that's going to make change in your community concern. And how do I get the biggest bang for my buck, and what does it matter? Because don't spend your whole time going, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this, and then you realize even if we do it, you don't get anything, right? Um, and so one of the things to make sure is that you're not persuading me of something that already exists. Remember, and I've said this in other videos, the only way you can do that is if you show threat. So if I want to argue that we should keep the mock trial team on campus, we already have a mock trial team. That's not going to be interesting to persuade you we need mock trial at UWM. But if that program is in trouble and they're threatening to cut it, and I can show threat, then I can persuade you we need to save it, right? I'm going to talk about reproductive rights, so if that's a hard topic, feel free to tune me out, and then I'll wave when I'm done. But it's a great example because Roe v. Wade, which took effect, I'm not going to remember the year, 60s, 70s. I'm tempted to stop the video and just go like that. It's not in my brain, right? But decades we've had Roe v. Wade, and no matter how you feel about access to abortion, right? But the Democrats have been the party that supports, access, choice. But what's fascinating is abortions go down under Democratic rule. That's true. Look it up. You can be like, Mizzo's up on her soapbox. That's just a fact, right? And I've read it a bunch of places, so I don't have one source to cite, but you can easily look it up. The Google machine is magical. But anyway, we've known for years, since before Trump took office. I mean, that was one of the things Trump was very open about, was that he was going to nominate a Supreme Court justice to take away abortion access. And Democrats have had decades to ratify it, to protect it, because there was threat, and they never did. And so, you could have, now the persuasion is easy because we don't have access. We don't in Wisconsin because the legislature does not support access in Wisconsin because it defaulted to the state rights. But even a few years ago when Roe v. Wade happened, and if they reinstate it, if you can show threat, you can persuade we need to do more, ratify it, save it, whatever. So you're using your organization and your information, right, to really convince us of what we need to do. And don't be afraid to tell us it's hard. And don't be afraid to tell us that this is big structural change, but here's what we need to do as individuals to contribute. Or here's what we can do individually that might not make a lot of change, but every plastic bottle we recycle helps, right? So, and don't be afraid to dig deep into your topic and to actually do the things that'll make change. Don't spend your time talking about what you think you should talk about. Talk about things that actually will get change to happen and actually get us to do things or make change somehow. Okay. Email me if you have any questions. Don't let any of this mess you up. If you already had plans, make change. Let this help how it helps, and if it doesn't, totally fine. Let me know if you need anything. Have a beautiful day.